Hello, sleepy soul. The night is quiet, the world is asleep, and something is waiting in the dark. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and write your country and current time in the comments. Now listen carefully. I used to drive long-haul routes for a living. 12-hour stretches, empty highways, the kind of silence that gets inside your skull and starts whispering to you. I'm telling you this story because it happened to me 3 years ago on a stretch of road called Route 9, and I still can't drive past that exit without my hands shaking on the wheel. It was a Tuesday night in late November. I was hauling a delivery from Peshawar to Islamabad, running late because of a flat tire that had cost me almost 2 hours. The highway was dead empty. Not a single pair of headlights in either direction for as far as I could see. Just me, my truck, and a thin fog rolling in from the fields on either side of the road. Around midnight, I saw her. A woman standing on the shoulder of the road, wearing a white shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. No car, no flashlight, nothing. Just standing there, facing the highway, watching the traffic that wasn't coming. Now, if you drive long haul like I did, you learn the rules. Rule number 1, you don't stop for strangers on empty highways at night. Rule number 2, you especially don't stop for someone standing perfectly still, just watching, like they were expecting you. But something about her made me slow down. Maybe it was the cold. Maybe it was the way the fog seemed to part around her, like she wasn't quite touching the ground. I told myself I was just being cautious, easing off the gas to get a better look. That's when I noticed her face. She was young, maybe in her 20s, and she was crying, silently. No sound at all, just tears running down a face that didn't move. I don't know why I stopped. I've asked myself that question 100 times since. But I did. I rolled down my window, and she walked toward the truck slowly, almost gliding, and said in a voice barely above a whisper, "Can you take me to the hospital? My husband, he's hurt. Back there. Please." She pointed behind her, toward a bend in the road where I could just make out the twisted shape of a car, half flipped into the ditch, its one remaining headlight pointing uselessly at the sky. Every instinct in my body told me to drive away, but I couldn't leave someone stranded with an injured husband on a dead highway at midnight. So I told her to get in. She sat in the passenger seat, and the first thing I noticed was the cold. Not the cold of the night air rushing in, a different cold, the kind that settles into your bones and doesn't leave. The heater in my truck was running full blast, and still, sitting next to her felt like sitting next to an open freezer. "Where's the hospital?" I asked. "Keep driving," she said. "I'll tell you when to stop." I should have turned back right there. Instead, I drove. For 10 minutes, 15, she said nothing, just stared straight ahead through the windshield, her shawl pulled tight, her hands folded in her lap like she was praying. I tried making small talk, asked her name, asked what happened to the car, and she answered only the first question. "Sana," she said. Nothing else. It was around the 20-minute mark that I made the mistake of glancing at her hands. They were folded so tightly that her knuckles had gone white, and that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. There was no breath. No fog on the windshield in front of her, even though it was freezing outside and she was sitting right next to the glass. I'd been driving with the windows slightly cracked, and my own breath was visible in small clouds. Hers was not. I told myself I was imagining things. Tired eyes, long shift. But then she spoke again, and her voice had changed, lower, slower, almost mechanical. "You passed it," she said. "Past what?" "The hospital turn. 5 kilometers back." I hadn't seen any hospital sign. I told her that, and she turned her head toward me for the first time since getting in the truck. Her eyes were completely black. Not dark brown, not dilated pupils, black from edge to edge, like looking into 2 holes where eyes should be. "Turn around," she said. Now. My hands were shaking on the wheel, but some survival instinct took over, and I did the only thing I could think of. I slammed the brakes, threw the truck into park, and reached across to throw open her door. "Get out," I said. "Get out of my truck." She didn't move. She just smiled. And it was the worst thing I have ever seen, because her smile stretched too wide, far past where a human mouth should be able to go, splitting her face nearly ear to ear. "You already let me in," she whispered. That was the only part that mattered. And then she was gone. Not got out, not vanished in a puff of smoke. Just gone, the seat empty, the door still hanging open, the cold air rushing in from outside. Except now it felt warmer than the air inside the cab had been a second ago. I didn't stop driving until I reached a fuel station almost an hour later, hands locked on the wheel, engine running far past the speed limit. When I finally pulled over and looked at myself in the rearview mirror, I noticed something that has haunted me since. A single black handprint, scorched into the passenger seat, exactly where she had been sitting. I never drove Route 9 again. I quit long-haul trucking 3 months later. But here's the part that really keeps me up at night. Years later, I did some digging, the way you do when something won't leave you alone. There was a woman named Sanaa who died on that exact stretch of road 15 years before that night. A car accident, her husband killed instantly. She survived just long enough to be found by a passing driver who stopped to help. That driver was never seen again. So if you're ever driving an empty highway late at night, and you see someone standing alone on the shoulder, watching the road like they're waiting for someone, keep driving. Don't look in the rearview mirror. And whatever you do, don't stop. The rain started like static, a thin, insistent drizzle that made the neon reflect off the asphalt in long, trembling lines. I was driving home from the city, hands tight on the wheel, windows streaked with water. The breakup was still fresh, 2 months, and every mirror, every shadow, felt like it remembered me differently than I remembered myself. I had left the apartment in a hurry, the place still humming with the faint echo of arguments I had long since stopped understanding. My body wanted motion. My mind wanted anything but stillness. The highway stretched ahead, empty. Fog pressed against the edges of the road like a memory that wouldn't let go. Then I saw it, the exit sign. Exit 47, Oak Ridge Road. I'd passed it before, hundreds of times, but now it felt too sharp, too urgent. I took it without thinking. 5 minutes later, I was back on the highway. Same asphalt, same neon reflections glimmering in puddles, same fog curling along the median. I blinked. The exit sign appeared again. Exit 47, Oak Ridge Road. I drove past it. I took it again. The same. The repetition made my stomach twist. The dashboard lights hummed in a mechanical, anxious rhythm. My hands shook. Rain drummed against the windshield in erratic pulses, the wipers slicing through it like knives. I told myself it was fatigue. Maybe the fog was thicker than I realized. Maybe I had driven in circles without noticing. I wanted to believe it. I told myself it made sense. The third time I took the exit, I saw them. Figures by the roadside. Pale. Wet. Faces frozen in screams. Hands raised. Eyes wide with silent terror. Drivers. Students. People I recognized from campus news archives, vanished years ago. One of them wore the exact hoodie my old roommate had favored. Another had a backpack I had passed in the hallway only last semester. I swerved to avoid them. My tires hissed on wet asphalt. I glanced back. They were gone. No bodies. No footprints. Nothing. The rain felt heavier. Neon blurred. My pulse drummed louder than the wipers. Later that night, I found a note on my phone. A text from an unknown number. "Slow down. Watch the exits." I stared at it, trembling. My apartment was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator, the distant clatter of pipes, and the soft drip from the faucet. I knew I wasn't imagining anything, and yet part of me wanted to rationalize it. Maybe someone was screwing with me. Maybe I was overthinking. I told myself it made sense. The next day I met her, Claire. She sat at the cafe, where I went to escape the apartment silence. Calm, attentive, smelled faintly of rain and coffee. She knew my order without me saying a word. She knew my favorite table. She knew my favorite jazz station, the one I played at home while staring at the ceiling in the empty apartment. "How long have you been coming here?" I asked. "Long enough to notice the way you linger on the window," she said. "You're thinking about something." Her voice gentle. "Safe. I wanted to believe it. I told myself it made sense. That night, I took the exit again. The fog was thicker, curling along the asphalt in ghostly waves. Rain hammered harder. Neon flickered in puddles, fractured like broken glass. I passed the figures again. Closer this time. Faces twisted in silent screams. I slowed. Every instinct screamed to floor the accelerator. But my body betrayed me. I was frozen, watching as one figure pressed a hand to the side mirror. Another lifted a backpack that glimmered with some impossible light. A text buzzed. Unknown number. You're close. Don't panic. Don't speed. I swallowed. The words were calm, observant, invasive, almost intimate. By the fifth loop, the highway itself felt wrong. Endless. Stretching, curling, repeating. Every exit I took led back to the same point. Signs flickered. Fog pressed in. The rain sounded like whispers against my windshield. The figures on the roadside grew more detailed. Some recognized me. Some begged. Some pointed toward a turn I couldn't see. I realized they weren't just specters. They were fragments. Memories. Souls of travelers trapped, feeding the road, feeding something that wanted me to make a mistake. I texted Claire. It's happening. I can't escape. She responded immediately. Don't rush. The highway knows impatience. The night's blurred. I documented everything. Photos of the exit signs, timestamps, notes on the figures I saw. The highway was teaching me patterns, feeding me fragments of lives it had collected. Every driver who had vanished before me was a lesson in patience. Every twist of neon reflected their mistakes. I began seeing impossible details. A license plate I remembered from a classmate who disappeared 3 years ago. A backpack I recognized from someone I had met only in passing. A pair of shoes identical to mine. Worn, dirty, but not mine. I wanted to believe Claire was helping. I told myself it made sense. One night, I slowed to a crawl. The fog clung to my headlights, rain dripping from the rearview mirror in uneven droplets. Figures lined the side of the road, screaming, pleading, waving. I braked, waited, breathed. A figure approached. Familiar. My old roommate, gone for 2 years. She looked at me, mouth moving, silent. Her eyes screamed. The highway hummed. Tires on wet asphalt, wipers slicing the rain, distant sirens echoing from the city. My car's engine thrummed in my chest. I realized the truth. The highway wasn't broken. It wasn't a loop. It was alive, feeding, absorbing those who never reconciled their past mistakes. Each traveler's impatience, each ignored lesson, each fear, fuel for its eternity. I had been reckless before, rushing through life, rushing through grief, rushing through mistakes. The climax came one night when I saw it clearly, a checkpoint, a fork in the road. One path led forward, one led back into the same loop. I stopped, breath ragged, rain lashing the windshield. Neon fractured. Footsteps echoed in my ears. Claire appeared suddenly in the passenger seat. Calm, observant, gentle. Her eyes knew everything, my routines, my fears, my mistakes. She handed me a note. Slow. Watch. Survive. I obeyed. Every breath measured. Every turn deliberate. Every reflection watched. The figures dissipated as I drove carefully, neon lights bleeding through fog like breadcrumbs. The highway shivered, but I survived the night. Weeks later, police investigated reports of missing students and drivers. The highway seemed normal. Signs were straight, asphalt unbroken, but some vehicles never returned. Evidence suggested manipulation, tracking, surveillance, psychological experimentation, but nothing concrete. I moved apartments, changed numbers, stopped dating apps, turned off GPS. Every night, I hear echoes, the rain on my window, the distant hum of tires on asphalt, the faint whisper of a highway that never ends. I survived, but not untouched. Trust is fragile. Boundaries are thin. Obsession is patient. Memory lasts longer than the mistakes that created it. And some roads are alive, watching, waiting, feeding on those who forget to slow down. I never rush anymore. Story 2. Rain made the highway invisible. Neon signs from the gas station glared through the sheets of water on the asphalt, slicing the dark into sharp, colored streaks. My windshield wipers were useless. I was alone, or so I thought, the cabin of my car filled with the hum of the engine and the distant drip of water leaking somewhere along the roof. I had been driving for hours. I shouldn't have been on the road this late. The breakup was still raw, twisting inside me like a cold wire. I had moved across the city after leaving him. An apartment too small, too silent, a life too empty. But I was trying to feel something other than loneliness. The rain tapping the roof seemed like it could drown me in memory. Then I saw him, standing by the roadside. A thumb out, a thumb that trembled slightly in the neon blur. Jeans soaked, hooded jacket, pale face that glimmered in the reflection of passing headlights. He looked familiar, in a way that made my chest tighten. I slowed, rationalizing. A student? A lost traveler? Someone else who had been caught in the storm. I pulled over. He climbed in without a word. His clothes smelled faintly of ozone and wet pavement. "I'm sorry," he said, voice calm, measured, almost intimate. "I didn't want to get drenched. I'd have waited, but the rain, it keeps moving fast." I nodded, hands tight on the wheel. "Where to?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Does it matter?" I wanted to believe him. I told myself it was just someone needing a ride. We drove. The road stretched in silver ribbons beneath the rain. The car radio played soft jazz, distant enough to mingle with the hum of the tires. My nerves were tight, anticipating a prank, a mugging, an accident. Then he said my name. Not in greeting, not in conversation. Just my name. I froze. My pulse skittered. "You always drive this route after work," he said. "Even when you tell yourself you're taking another street." I swallowed. How do you know that?" He shrugged. "Observation. Maybe luck." I told myself it made sense. I wanted to believe it. Maybe I was overthinking. The first few miles were quiet after that, but he began to speak again, in ways that cut through the mundane sounds of tires and rain. He knew things, small, intimate things. My favorite diner, where I stopped for late-night coffee. The playlist I listened to when I was trying to fall asleep in the new apartment. The email I drafted but never sent to a former friend, explaining why I had stopped calling. Each detail made my stomach twist. I tried to rationalize. Maybe he had seen me on social media. Maybe he had read old posts, pieced together my patterns. Maybe it was coincidence. But then he mentioned the name my ex used to call me. The one I hadn't heard in years. "I'm glad you still remember that," he said softly. "You never told anyone." I tightened my grip on the wheel. My pulse raced. My rational mind fought for control. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe he was a good observer. Maybe he was someone harmless. But the miles stretched endlessly, rain blurring everything. My headlights reflected in the windshield, in the wet asphalt, in his eyes. And I began to notice something impossible. Every street corner we passed, every diner, every shadowed alley, it was like he had known they would be there. The phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it. Another buzz. I finally looked. Unknown number. No message. Just a call. I ignored it. Then I glanced at him. He was staring straight at me. Not the road. Me. Calm. Patient. Observing. "You're trying to ignore it," he said. "I can see it." I told myself it made sense. Maybe he was just attuned to human expression. Maybe he could read micro-expressions. Maybe I was paranoid. But then he described my apartment. Not the layout. Not the furniture. The smell of coffee I brewed at 7:03 a.m. The exact shelf where I kept my keys. I spun around, checking my rearview mirror, the back seat. No cameras. No one else. Just him. I whispered, Who are you?" He smiled faintly. "Someone who has been waiting for you to notice. Someone who knows what you've been carrying." I wanted to believe he was a real person. Someone empathetic. Someone who could see me without judgment. Then he spoke of mistakes. Minor ones. Forgotten ones. People I had hurt without realizing. Calls I didn't make. Apologies I never gave. Regrets I had buried. I felt the car close in on me. Every mile, every detail, every secret he spoke aloud made me shrink. "I know about the accident," he said quietly. I gasped. A minor crash I had caused 3 years ago. No one was hurt, but I had blamed myself silently every night. How could he know? I told myself it made sense, I whispered. Maybe it was someone who had read the police report. Maybe someone connected the dots. But then he laughed softly, not cruelly, calmly. "You can't hide from this," he said. "I see it all. Every hesitation, every lie to yourself." The rain blurred into rivers. Headlights smeared the wet asphalt. Neon reflected in the puddles, splitting the world into fragments. I wanted to scream, but my voice caught. I tried to stop the car. The brakes worked. I pulled over on a deserted stretch. The wipers flailed uselessly against the downpour. He turned to me, not angrily, not impatiently, just knowingly. "Every mile you think you've escaped, you've only traveled further into yourself," he said. I wanted to believe he was human, that I could reach him, that this was just a person exploiting my fear. Then the dashboard clock blinked. 3:33 a.m. The highway was empty. The exit lights flickered. The neon from a lone cafe reflected in the rearview mirror, and I saw the impossible. The car behind me, empty, headlights on, mirrors empty, but the plate mine. I spun. He smiled faintly. "You've been driving against yourself all along," he said. The realization hit like ice. He wasn't real. Not entirely. He was the manifestation of my guilt, my mistakes, my regrets, every choice I had refused to face. He had been riding with me all along, feeding on the tension I carried. Every mile, every confession, every memory I had tried to lock away had formed him. I slammed the car into park. Rain poured through the cracks in the door frame. The engine hummed. The empty highway stretched endlessly. I had to break the pattern. I had to confront him, or I would vanish into the roads I traveled in my mind forever. I spoke aloud. "I remember. I take responsibility. I own it." He smiled, a faint, dissolving smile. The reflection in the windshield blurred. The seat beside me was empty. The highway stretched onward, just wet asphalt and neon again. I drove the rest of the night in silence. The radio played soft jazz. Sirens faded in the distance. My pulse slowed. My hands still shook. Police found no one on the highway when I reported the incident. No sign of the hitchhiker. No cameras. No recordings. Nothing but the endless road and the puddles reflecting the neon in fragments. I returned to my apartment the next morning. The streets were dry. People moved as if nothing had happened. The world was ordinary again, but I carry it with me. I notice reflections more than I used to. Shadows move differently in my peripheral vision. Rain tapping windows makes me tense. I check my mirrors twice. I double-check messages. I lock the doors. I survived, but I am changed, because some hitchhikers are real, and some are the roads you traveled inside yourself. Some ride beside you, silent and knowing, feeding on what you refuse to confess. And some of them never leave. Story 3. The rain had been falling since the morning, soft at first, then relentless, turning the city streets into sheets of black glass and silver reflections. I was driving home from the outskirts of town, the kind of road lined with shuttered cafes and glowing neon signs reflected in puddles, trying to shake the weight of weeks that had left me hollow. A breakup 6 months ago, a relocation I barely wanted, loneliness that didn't forgive. I didn't even remember the last time I had slept through the night without the apartment humming around me. Pipes, fridge, the faint creaks of the old floorboards. That evening, I took the highway that cuts through the forested outskirts, away from the neon-lit avenues. The fog rolled in faster than expected. Not the usual mist that curls lazily through trees, but a thick, unnatural fog that swallowed light, erased distance, and smothered sound. Headlights barely penetrated it. I slowed, gripping the wheel, listening to the hum of the engine and the rhythm of rain tapping the windshield. The first vision appeared without warning. A figure on the shoulder. Familiar. I blinked. The shape was her. My ex, The one who left me with too many unanswered words and a silence that felt like it had claws. She smiled faintly, as if nothing had ever happened. I hesitated. My foot remained on the brake, but instinct whispered to keep moving. The fog swallowed her when I blinked again. I told myself it was a trick of the headlights, reflections on wet asphalt. Maybe exhaustion, maybe loneliness. I wanted to believe it. A few miles deeper, another figure emerged. A childhood friend I hadn't spoken to in years, someone I had forgotten entirely, yet his face was engraved in memory the moment I saw it. Alive, laughing, or maybe dead. My mind couldn't tell. Each time I blinked, they moved closer, always within reach, always familiar. The highway stretched endlessly. The fog thickened, muting the wiper's swipe and the engine's low growl. The dashboard clock flickered, 3:17 a.m., though I had no idea if it was real. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, faint, swallowed by the mist. I tried to exit. Signs blurred into white shapes. Turnoffs disappeared. The GPS refused to update. My phone buzzed incessantly. Notifications, emails I hadn't sent, messages from friends I didn't recognize, each referencing intimate details I had never shared. My favorite cafe, my old playlist, the scarf I always wore on rainy nights. I told myself it made sense. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe it was exhaustion. I told myself it was coincidence. Then the messages changed. Stop. Don't pull over. They see you. My pulse spiked. The fog seemed to pulse in response, tightening, pressing in. A figure appeared in the road. Not human. Not exactly. It had my face. My body. A few seconds ahead. Smiling with knowledge it shouldn't have. I slammed on the brakes. Skid marks burned into the asphalt. The vision stopped. Held up its hand. I couldn't move. My breath caught. I saw every detail. The scar I thought healed. The way my hair fell when wet. The twitch of my right eye I never noticed. It knew me better than I knew myself. A voice crackled in my ear. My phone. Unknown number. You are not alone. You never have been. I wanted to believe it was a prank. Some elaborate app, someone tracking me digitally. But the voice, soft, calm, precise, knew everything. My routines, my fears, the nights I had cried alone. It was familiar enough to unsettle, intimate enough to terrify. Somewhere behind me, a faint car horn sounded. The fog swallowed it. Headlights flickered. The silhouettes appeared again. Friends, relatives, lovers I had forgotten or lost. Some alive, some dead, and always, always their eyes fixed on me. They weren't moving in real time. They were ahead, predicting my reactions, forcing me to watch, to hesitate, to breathe in their presence. I drove. I couldn't stop. The fog didn't allow it. Every exit I knew vanished, swallowed by white. Every mile forward felt like sliding deeper into a trap. Then she appeared. Clara. Calm, patient, familiar. She worked in the campus library. She had noticed me weeks ago, offered advice without judgment, remembered my favorite books, my quiet habits, my coffee routine. She had been comforting without pressing, observing without taking. I wanted to trust her. I wanted her presence to be real. Her figure emerged from the mist, standing on the shoulder. I slowed instinctively. She held a hand out. You need to listen, she said. Voice low, precise. Do not stop. Do not look away. It wants hesitation. I nodded, my foot barely moving. She stepped back, and I saw it clearly. The shadow ahead of me, my own body, perfectly mirrored, advancing with precision, every micro-expression exact. It was the stalker's projection, predictive, anticipatory. Each vision, each person was draining me. Not physically, not consciously, but in some way my energy, my memories, my will. I wanted to believe it wasn't real. I wanted to rationalize. Maybe my mind was playing tricks. Maybe the fog was optical illusion. Maybe exhaustion had created hallucinations. I told myself it made sense. But I saw the hands of the shadow mimic mine exactly when I gripped the wheel. The messages escalated, turn left. Brake now. Don't look at them. Every one time to my precise movements. My phone buzzed. Burner accounts. Fake profiles. Voice notes. metadata showing location history I hadn't shared. I realized then the truth. This wasn't fog. Not entirely. It was a system. Predictive tracking. Someone or something was studying me. Every emotion, every blink, every micro-hesitation. And those who appeared in the mist were previous victims, imprinted onto the projections, feeding into the next cycle. Clara led me mentally, instructing via texts and brief calls through a secure burner line. She knew the building codes, the overlooked turnoffs, the maintenance tunnels that led to the highway edge. She was comforting, calm, the only voice that made sense. But the details she knew about me, private routines, tiny habits, things I thought forgotten, made me uneasy. "I'm trying to help," she said once, during a pit stop in a gas station parking lot swallowed in fog. Neon signs flickered. The rain drummed the asphalt. The coffee inside smelled faintly burnt. But it knows you better than you know yourself. I nodded. I told myself it made sense. I wanted to believe it. The fog thickened. The projections advanced. Every face I recognized, friends, family, lovers, stared at me. Their expressions grew impatient, malevolent, hungry, draining. One figure stepped into the lane. My shadow ahead, my hands on the wheel, my eyes pale and reflective in the fog. It smiled, and I realized that exiting was impossible unless I confronted it. Clara had a plan. Using the maintenance exits, emergency lights, and a network of sensors she had mapped over weeks, we forced the projections to destabilize. My car skidded into the shoulder. Fog clung to the trees. Lights flickered. Every vision screamed, then faded. By the time police arrived, the highway had cleared. The fog had dissipated unnaturally fast. They found dozens of trackers along the route, hidden cameras, drone paths, and evidence of predictive AI algorithms designed to trap and manipulate drivers. The stalker, an ex-engineer with access to local infrastructure and social data, was apprehended. Clara disappeared shortly after, leaving a note. Surviving doesn't mean forgetting. Remember carefully. I returned to the city, the apartment above the laundromat, the hum of the fridge, the rain tapping windows. I survived, but every shadow, every reflection in neon or puddle, every foggy street at night reminds me of what was predicted, anticipated, controlled. I learned that isolation and vulnerability can be weaponized. That memory can be used against you. That someone who observes patiently, quietly, can manipulate fear itself. And I learned this. Surviving isn't about escaping the fog. It's about remembering that every step forward might already have been foreseen, and that the safest path is sometimes the one you never thought you'd take. Story 4. Rain-slicked streets bled neon across the windshield. Red from a pharmacy sign, blue from a convenience store. The reflections pooled in puddles, stretched across crosswalks. My windshield wipers kept time with the rain, but the blur never cleared. I was driving home alone. Again, I had moved to this city after a breakup that left me hollow, after a few too many nights spent talking to myself in my apartment while the radiator hissed like it was mocking me. My life smelled faintly of coffee, wet leather, and old grief. I told myself I was rebuilding. I wasn't sure I believed it. The rearview mirror caught my eye. At first, it was normal. My reflection, tired eyes, pale face, damp hair plastered to my forehead. I exhaled, fogging the glass. But then it blinked differently. A fraction slower. A tilt of the head that I hadn't made. I froze. The reflection gestured. Just a subtle hand motion back. Stop. I hesitated. My pulse thrummed in my ears. The street stretched ahead, wet and gleaming. I obeyed the reflection. Slowed. Took the turn it suggested. The world spun. The wipers slowed. The city dissolved into screams. Glass shattered under the tires. Metal crunched. I was outside the car, lying on the wet asphalt, the neon reflections jagged and red in my eyes. And then it faded. I was back in the driver's seat. The street normal. Rain, wipers, neon. My pulse slowed. My hands shook. I told myself I had imagined it. Fatigue. Stress. Maybe I was overthinking. It happened again the next night. Same rain. Same neon blur. I didn't want to drive, but I had to. The rearview mirror moved before I could even blink. A subtle nod. This time forward. Go. I obeyed. The hallucination came. My last car accident, magnified, vivid, twisting. The smell of burnt rubber. The sound of crunching metal. The feeling of helplessness I had carried for years. I woke up at home later, drenched in sweat. The radiator hissed. My apartment smelled like wet concrete. I found my phone buzzing, a single voicemail. My own voice. Whispered, "You're listening now. You understand." I could feel it under my skin. Someone had been watching. Someone had known exactly how to reach me. That is when I met Jonah. He appeared in my life almost casually. Coffee shop. Same corner. A quiet voice, attentive, patient. He noticed the little things, the book I carried, the song I hummed under my breath, my preferred route home in the rain. He remembered my old nickname, the one only Daniel had ever used. "You always take that left at the intersection," he said one morning, "even when the puddles are deep." I froze. I hadn't told him. Not anyone. "I guess I do," I murmured. "Nothing wrong with routines," he said, soft, understanding. "They keep us steady." I wanted to believe him. I told myself it made sense. Maybe he was just perceptive. The mirror began to escalate. Sometimes it warned me. Sometimes it demanded. Every time I obeyed, I saw memories I had tried to bury. Accidents, fights, failures. Each hallucination more vivid, more horrifying than the last. I started taking notes. Every night, the time, the reflections, gestures, the hallucinations. But the recordings on my phone only showed me driving alone. No reflection movement. No impossible visions. I deleted the footage. I told myself I was protecting myself. Then the messages started. Emails from burner accounts. Screenshots from my social media. Notes of things I hadn't told anyone. My favorite coffee blend. My route along the wet streets. The song I hummed while folding laundry at home. They knew. And Jonah, he knew it too. Or at least, he acted like he did. "It's easy to feel alone," he said one night as we sat on the apartment steps, rain dripping from the awning above. "But noticing things, understanding someone, it's how trust is built." I wanted to believe him. I told myself it made sense. The night I realized the truth was quiet at first. I had taken a wrong turn. The rearview reflection tilted its head, then gestured back. "Stop." I obeyed, and I saw it clearly this time. My own body, lying mangled in the rain, neon reflections broken across the asphalt. But then the image moved. It wasn't me exactly. It was the reflection reaching toward the wheel, reaching toward the road, reaching toward life. I understood then. The reflection didn't just guide. It wanted to replace me. I screamed and slammed the brakes. The hallucination shattered, rain spraying over the hood. I pulled over, trembling, soaked. My phone buzzed. A single email. From an account I didn't recognize. "Good. You see now. You are ready." I confronted Jonah. "You know," I said, voice shaking. "All of this, the reflections, the messages, the warnings." He looked at me calm, eyes steady. "I've only ever tried to help." "Help?" I whispered. "Do you even know what you've done? The things you've shown me?" He shrugged. A careful gesture. "I know you better than you know yourself. You want to be safe, but you need guidance." I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe he was innocent. But my gut had learned faster than my heart. I started tracking everything. Phone numbers, social media, locations. Every possible pattern Jonah, or whoever, might use. I discovered burner phones, AI voice clone messages, automated emails. Each one a layer, a construct designed to teach me fear, obedience, dependence. I realized then, Jonah was not Jonah. Not fully. Just a persona crafted to manipulate, observe, and escalate. Multiple victims, multiple cities, repeated patterns. Each reflection, each hallucination, each whispered message designed to destabilize. To replace. The climax came on the rainy streets where it began. Police followed my instructions. Phone metadata traced the AI-generated accounts. Emails led to burner servers. When the detectives arrived, Jonah, or rather, the operative behind the network, sat calmly in an apartment lined with phones, laptops, and recordings of dozens of victims. He or she did not resist, just smiled faintly. "I only wanted to guide," the calm voice said. I felt anger, relief, fear, and grief at once. I survived. I moved apartments, changed my number, deleted accounts, installed locks and cameras. Every night, rain taps the windows, reminding me of neon streets and mirrored reflections. I learned that survival does not erase the memory of being hunted, that trust is a fragile construct, that privacy can be reconstructed, repurposed, and weaponized. I drive less now. I avoid mirrors when the rain blurs the street. And I wonder sometimes whether someone is watching me still, learning my habits, my preferences, my fears. Memory can be recorded. Identity can be stolen. Obsession can be gentle, subtle, and patient. And sometimes, even a reflection is not yourself. And maybe that is the lesson, that survival is more than staying alive. It is learning that some reflections can never be trusted. Story 5. I first noticed it during a late-night drive in the rain. The road was slick, neon from distant signage pooling in puddles along the asphalt. Mile markers blinked past, numbering one after the other: 664, 665, 666. I slowed instinctively, the tires hissing as the wipers struck in uneven rhythm. I had been driving for months now, after the divorce. The apartment I'd shared with her felt hollowed out, the silence louder than any argument we ever had. I moved to this city to rebuild myself, but grief and loneliness had a way of trailing me, even into my sleep. Driving became meditation, a way to measure time with headlights and rain, with the hum of the engine. But 666 wasn't right. I stopped, pulled over. The puddles reflected the marker, strange and shimmering. There was a piece of paper taped to the post. Ink faded, yet perfectly legible. "Do not linger. Your name will follow soon." My hands shook on the wheel. I laughed once, brittle and forced. A prank. Someone with too much time. Maybe I was overthinking. I told myself it made sense. I was wrong. The next week, I saw the next marker. Mile 667. Another paper. Another cryptic message. This time, "You remember the night of the accident. Someone else's blood." I froze. The road hummed under my tires. Rain blurred the neon into long, trembling lines. My chest tightened. Memories I hadn't wanted to face, the crash that took my ex-boyfriend's brother years ago, surfaced, raw and vivid. At the next rest stop, I met a man named Eli. He wore a trucker's hat and had the kind of calm voice that made you want to listen, lean in. He noticed my hands trembling. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked quietly. "No," I admitted. "Just passing through." He smiled faintly. Observant. Attentive. The markers, they get to some people. They notice. I wanted to believe him. I told myself it made sense. Over the following nights, the markers appeared earlier, closer together. Each one contained details from my past, twisted, intimate, impossible. One referenced the first apartment I'd rented in this city. Another mentioned the song I hummed and falling asleep, the one my ex hated. I tried to ignore it, rationalize it. Maybe Eli had placed them, or maybe someone was stalking me. Maybe I had just been too sensitive after everything. But the shadows on the roadside began to appear. Drivers long gone in life, mouths open in silent screams, pointing, waving. Their jackets familiar. Their vehicles recognizable from news clippings of accidents on this highway over the last decade. I started taking photos, notes, timestamps. The road stretched on, unending, looping almost imperceptibly. Every exit I took led me back to the markers. Eli stayed nearby, calm, observant, sometimes passing me coffee at a diner off the highway, always knowing what I'd ordered without me saying a word. He asked about my route, my stops, my favorite rest areas. I rationalized it. Maybe he was just a helpful trucker. Maybe I was reading too much into kindness. I told myself it made sense. Then one night, at mile 672, I stopped and the paper read, "He watches your hesitation. Every choice echoes." I felt the road tighten around me. The rain sounded like whispers on the roof of my cab. Footsteps echoed along the shoulder. A car that shouldn't exist drove past, slowing just enough for me to see the driver's face. A friend who had disappeared 10 years ago, eyes wide, mouth opening silently. I hit the brakes, heart pounding, tires screeching. Neon reflections fractured across the wet asphalt. The pattern became clear. Each marker corresponded to someone who had vanished. Each message reflected my own life, my own mistakes. The road wasn't a road. It was a mirror, a liminal space feeding on the guilt and unprocessed grief of travelers. Those who lingered, who failed to reconcile their past, became part of it. I realized I had been feeding it with every hesitation, every lingering thought, every night spent staring at the ceiling in my lonely apartment. One night, I stopped at mile 675. The paper read, "You are close. One mistake, and the highway remembers." I saw her then, Claire. She was there at the rest stop, leaning against a guardrail. Calm, attentive, familiar. She knew my coffee order, the song I hummed to pass the night hours, my old nickname from college. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "I have no choice," I whispered. "You do," she replied. "You always do." Her eyes were observant, invasive, but gentle enough to make me want to trust her. I wanted to believe it. I told myself it made sense. The markers accelerated. The messages became urgent. They referenced things I had only thought about in private. My failed relationships. The argument I had left unresolved with my father. The text I never sent to my best friend. By mile 680, I understood the rule. Stopping too long meant consumption. The road would claim those who lingered, folding them into its shadows, fragmenting their consciousness into the asphalt hum. I tried to speed, but my cab refused. The steering wheel resisted. Neon reflections twisted, refracting the headlights into impossible shapes. Voices whispered from the fog, the lost drivers, their mouths open, pleading warning. I called the police. Anonymous. Tried to explain. A long highway, disappearing drivers, cryptic mile markers. Rain in my ears, neon reflected in puddles. They said it was impossible, a hallucination, paranoia, or perhaps a prank. They wouldn't investigate. Eli appeared again, at a diner along the route. Calm, observant. "You can't outrun it," he said, "but you can navigate it." I wanted to believe him. I told myself it made sense. The final marker loomed, mile 666. I stopped. The paper fluttered against the post, soaked, edges curling. Final choice. Slow enough, and you survive. Fast, and you vanish. I swallowed. The rain pelted my windshield like fists. Neon reflected in puddles, fractured. Footsteps echoed from the foggy shoulder. A truck swerved past me, headlights catching faces I knew, friends, classmates, strangers who had disappeared. All staring, all pleading. I slowed. Deliberately. Measured. Chewed each breath, each heartbeat. The road hummed beneath me, alive, patient, waiting. Weeks later, I moved apartments. Changed numbers. Turned off tracking. Avoided highways late at night. I still hear the hum of the road in dreams, the faint drip of rain on windows, the soft jazz of distant cafes. I survived, but I am changed. Trust is fragile. Memory persists. Obsession is patient. The boundaries between guilt and survival are thinner than a reflective line of neon on wet asphalt. And some roads never let you leave. You just learn to drive slowly enough to survive. Story 6. Rain pounded the highway like a warning. The neon from the gas stations bled into the wet asphalt, stretching into bruised ribbons of red and blue. I was driving north, past the outskirts of the city, past the flickering billboards, past streets slick with midnight reflection. My apartment behind me smelled faintly of burnt coffee and the quiet residue of a recent breakup. I had moved here for a fresh start, to escape him, but the loneliness clung to me like fog on the tires. That's when I saw them. At first, I thought it was a trick of the wet pavement. A row of headlights, perfectly aligned. Vehicles I had seen before, the same models, the same paint colors. Ghostly in the rain. I slowed, squinted. The cars mirrored mine in every detail. A black sedan, rain streaming down the windshield, mirrors flicking in the neon. But when I glanced to see the drivers, the seats were empty. Silent. Still. My heart tightened. I rationalized. Maybe I was tired. Maybe the reflections from the streetlights were forming patterns. Maybe someone had been racing at the same speed in front of me. Maybe I was overthinking. But then the first car turned slightly, perfectly synchronized with my steering. I realized I was following it. I hadn't decided. My foot had pressed the accelerator, hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles hurt. The second car appeared, then the third. The convoy stretched for miles, lights shimmering through the rain, tailing me as if the highway itself had conspired to keep me moving. I tried to exit. The ramp was closed. Flashing construction lights blocked the off-ramp. I checked my phone. No signal. The radio was static. My GPS kept redirecting me back to the highway. Every exit looped me back. I told myself it made sense. Maybe it was a maintenance error. Maybe there was a diversion. Maybe I was imagining it. The first hour passed. The rain never stopped. My headlights reflected in the mirrors of the phantom cars. I noticed something impossible. Each one was a slightly distorted copy of my own sedan, down to the dents I hadn't reported, down to the scratches near the door handle from moving into the apartment. A chill ran down my spine. The convoy was feeding on me. I could feel it. Every mile, every blink, every hesitation. The vehicles didn't just mirror my car, they mirrored me. My mistakes, my fears. Every choice I had made in the past months, the last year, the decade, all condensed into this endless road. Then I heard a voice. Not through my speakers, not through my headphones. In my mind. You can't leave. I spun the wheel. The lanes seemed to shift. The cars were closer. I tried braking. The phantom sedans mirrored me. Brake lights flared in sync with mine. I panicked. My breath fogged the windshield. My pulse was a drum in my ears. A new voice whispered, calm, almost intimate. You've been running from yourself, it said. All your mistakes, all your guilt, they're here now. I wanted to believe it was a hallucination. Exhaustion. Dehydration. Something plausible. I noticed a car in the convoy blinked differently. Its headlights flickered in a rhythm I recognized. My favorite jazz song. The one I listened to when the nights were too quiet. My fingers tightened around the wheel. You always choose the left lane when you're anxious, the voice continued. You always check your mirrors twice. I swallowed hard. My eyes stung. I knew this. I had never told anyone. Not my friends. Not my therapist. Not even him. I wanted to believe it was someone tracking me. Social media. GPS metadata. Someone who knew my routines. Someone with access. I told myself it made sense. Then the convoy slowed. The cars ahead vanished into fog. My reflection in the windshield flickered. I could swear the phantom sedan's taillights formed shapes, memories, mistakes, faces I had ignored, friends I had abandoned, apologies I hadn't made. The next hour passed in silence. Or maybe it wasn't silence. The rain tapped a rhythm on the roof of my car. Tires hissed against puddles. Sirens echoed from a distant city. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I ignored it. Another buzz. I picked it up. A voice note. My own voice saying, "Stop." I dropped the phone. Heart thudding. Hands trembling. I wanted to leave. But the convoy had become a circle around me. Every exit rerouted me back to the same stretch of highway. The road reflected my past like water. Every bend, every curve, every shadow was familiar. Too familiar. Then I noticed a seat in one of the phantom sedans. Occupied. A young man I recognized from college, missing for 2 years. He stared at me, eyes wide. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. A faint shimmer of neon reflected in his eyes. I turned my head. Another car. Another missing student. A faintly distorted replica of someone who had disappeared from my neighborhood last summer. The convoy wasn't real, yet it was. It existed to trap people like me. Those with guilt, with regret, with mistakes they couldn't forgive themselves for. I wanted to believe I could outrun it. Then I remembered Elise, a barista from my old cafe, someone I had trusted. She had always noticed when I was exhausted, always offered warmth without judgment. Someone real. I whispered her name. My voice trembled. The phantom cars wavered slightly in the fog. The voice in my head, calm, intimate, sizzled. "You cannot summon her," it said. "Not yet." I gritted my teeth, trying to force my mind back into the present. I traced my own mistakes out loud. Every misstep I had made, every lie I had told myself. The accidents, the broken friendships, the words I hadn't said. One car blinked. Two. Then the entire convoy shimmered. The fog swallowed the highway. My pulse was unbearable. I braked hard. Tires screamed. The phantom sedans dissipated. My headlights reflected only asphalt, neon rain. Empty road. My car's engine hummed. My own reflection in the rearview mirror stared back, breathing. Alone. I kept driving. The city lights appeared faintly in the distance. Cafes still open, streets wet, neon reflecting in puddles. My phone buzzed constantly. Unknown numbers. I ignored them. When I reached my apartment, I parked, hands shaking, soaked from rain streaming through the car's cracked sunroof. I locked the doors, checked the mirrors. Every reflection felt like it was studying me. I tried to sleep. Couldn't. The police never found anything on the highway. No phantom convoy. No missing cars. No tracks in the wet asphalt. I survived. But I am different. I notice shadows differently now. Every reflection, every neon puddle, every tinted window makes me flinch. I check my GPS, my phone metadata, my car camera obsessively. I still hear the hum of tires on wet asphalt in my apartment sometimes. I have learned that guilt is a pattern, and some roads feed on it. That mistakes, unspoken apologies, regrets, they can be traced, predicted, exploited. And that some presences, though never alive, can mirror you, follow you, study you, and feed on your fear until you are empty. Somewhere out there, the phantom convoy waits. Silent, empty, watching, waiting for the next driver who hasn't learned to forgive themselves. And I know now how fragile trust and privacy can be. How fragile identity is when someone, or something, can mirror your every thought, your every failure, your every regret. The next time I see my reflection in a puddle, I don't just see me. I see every mile I've traveled wrong, every step I've avoided, and I wonder if it's watching, just beyond the fog, waiting to mirror me again. Story 7. Rain slicked the highway, neon signs flickering in puddles like fractured mirrors. I was driving home from the outskirts, hands tight on the wheel, listening to the hum of the engine and the soft hiss of wipers against the glass. The breakup was still fresh enough that every quiet moment felt loud. My apartment above the laundromat waited, too silent, too small, filled with the echo of a life I'd tried to leave behind. The first time the radio spoke, I thought I imagined it. Static crackled between stations, then a voice emerged, soft, intimate, too deliberate to be random. "I stole from my boss today," it said. It felt justified. "No one will know. I won't tell anyone." I glanced at the dashboard. No frequency changes. No pre-recorded news. The voice belonged to someone I did not know. I wanted to believe it was a prank. Maybe a local podcast glitching across AM frequencies. I told myself it made sense. But then the confession changed. "I hit my partner," the voice whispered. "And I'll do it again if I have to." I jerked the wheel. Rain blurred the edges of the road. Headlights reflected in the glassy asphalt. Shadows shifted in the peripheral lanes. I slowed. The highway was nearly empty, but I felt eyes, hundreds of eyes, pressed against my back. The voice became predictive. "Red car at mile marker 14 will swerve. Brake. Stop. Avoid." I obeyed instinctively. Seconds later, a car crossed the median, tires squealing, missing me by inches. My pulse thrummed louder than the engine. I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe the voice was something hacked, someone listening to traffic feeds. I wanted to believe it made sense. By the third night, the radio knew me. Not my name, not yet, but my habits. When I blinked, it described exactly how I did it. how I gripped the wheel too tightly when stressed, how I touched the keychain I carried as a reminder of home, the way I cursed quietly when a deer darted across the road. Then she appeared, Clara, soft, attentive, working in a bookstore near my apartment. She noticed my reading habits, remembered my preferred cafe corner, my playlist for nights too quiet to sleep. She smiled gently, asked about my weekend without probing. I wanted to trust her. I needed her to be normal, to anchor me in a world that had become strangely dangerous. The radio spoke again, my voice, reading a journal I hadn't touched in months. It whispered my thoughts aloud. The tone wasn't exactly me, but close enough to make me shiver. Clara noticed my reaction. "You're tired," she said, softly, kindly, but the look in her eyes said she understood there was more than fatigue at play. The confessions escalated. Murders, lies, betrayals, hidden desires. Names I barely remembered, friends, exes, strangers. And each time the radio described them, it added a warning. You will encounter this. Stop. Brake. Don't swerve. Once it described me. He fears the night. He checks the mirrors too often. He drives too fast when anxious. I checked my reflection in the rear view. My hands shook. I wanted to rationalize. Maybe someone had hacked the traffic cams. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe I had lost my mind from loneliness and grief. I told myself it made sense. The radio began to predict accidents in real time. A truck skidding on oil at mile 7. A deer darting at mile 12. A car crossing lanes at mile 14. Every prediction correct. Every prediction pushing me further down a spiral of fear. Then the personal details arrived. It described Clara before I met her. The scarf she wore on Mondays. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when nervous. The song she hummed from memory on rainy mornings. The exact cafe booth she always sat at, which she had never told me. I stopped speaking to her about the radio. I told myself she didn't know. I told myself it made sense. I wanted to believe it. I became hyper-aware of every movement, every shadow in the rear view, every reflection in neon puddles on the road. The fog clinging to the edges of the highway seemed alive, like it was anticipating the next confession. One night, I drove past mile 17. My phone buzzed with a burner notification. The voice said, "You are the next story." The highway twisted, the fog thickened. I could barely see the median lines. My pulse rattled in my ears. The radio whispered again, "Brake." They approached from behind. "The exit is gone. Do not leave the road." And then I understood. The radio wasn't just predicting fear. It was feeding on it. Every panic heartbeat, every gasp, every second of hesitation gave it life, power, control. The fog, the visions, the confessions, they weren't warnings. They were traps, and the highway had no escape. Clara appeared on the shoulder, waving. My instinct was relief, but the radio whispered her past. She helped him drive into you once. She will do it again. I braked, screeched. The tires lost traction on wet asphalt. The reflection in the rear view wasn't her. It was me, one heartbeat ahead, mirroring my every movement, predicting panic before it happened. I realized the truth. The highway, the radio, the confessions, they were all parts of a mechanism. A stalker with access to traffic cams, AI voice cloning, burner phones, metadata analysis. Predicting behavior, cultivating terror, watching from the edge of the road while feeding on fear like fuel. Clara, the comforting figure, the anchor, I discovered was a pawn. One of many digital constructs, trained to guide me into patterns I could not escape. She knew my routines because someone had observed me for weeks. Every cafe, every playlist, every vulnerable moment. I drove the only way I could, carefully, eyes flicking to the mirrors, listening to every word, obeying every command from the radio while calculating when and how to exit the spiral. I recorded everything. Metadata, GPS logs, audio, video. Every confessional whisper, every predicted accident. The police were incredulous at first, but the files were irrefutable. AI-assisted surveillance, predictive modeling, a campaign targeting lone drivers on that stretch of highway for months. Burners, clones, digital infiltration, multiple victims. Psychological manipulation. The stalker had been arrested weeks later. A former traffic analyst with access to city infrastructure and an obsession with human behavior. Multiple identities, multiple victims. He had crafted the radio and the confessions to trap and feed on fear. I survived, but I cannot drive that highway again. I cannot pass neon reflections at night without flinching. Every static crackle of a radio reminds me that someone could know my routines, my panic, my habits. That trust can be engineered. That fear can be harvested. That safety can be an illusion. I learned that surviving isn't enough. Surviving means recognizing how fragile memory, perception, and identity are, and how someone can manipulate all three to feed on you. And sometimes, the road you think you left behind keeps following, humming, whispering. Story 8. Rain. It never stopped. It hammered the windshield, tapped the roof, pooled in the mirrors, blurred the neon of the roadside signs until they ran like watercolor. I gripped the wheel tighter, the leather slick under my fingers. The highway stretched ahead, dark, endless, and quiet, except for the occasional hum of tires slicing through puddles. I was alone. Again. The city felt far behind me. A breakup still raw, a lease that smelled of cleaning bleach and loneliness. An apartment that echoed every night with the absence of human warmth. I had packed my life into a sedan, left the streets I knew, and drove for hours, chasing something. Closure. Escape. Rebuilding. I told myself it was progress. The first oddity appeared without warning. A patch of asphalt, slick with rain, seemed darker, thicker, and when my headlights swept over it, a dark red sheen rippled across the lane like blood. I blinked. I told myself I was imagining it. Reflections from the brake lights of passing trucks, oil mixed with rain. But the next patch appeared, and then another. The road pulsed as I drove. Slow, steady, alive. The first car vanished before I even had time to react. Headlights, brakes gone. The lane was empty, slick and red where the tires had been. I swallowed hard, my pulse thrumming. I slowed, tried the GPS detours. Signs, warnings. Every instruction looped me back. Every side road dissolved into fog and wet pavement. Then a voice spoke from the car next to me. Not real, not physical. A voice in my head. Calm, attentive. You can't leave yet, it said. Not until you understand yourself. I wanted to believe it. I told myself it made sense. Loneliness does strange things. Fatigue makes hallucinations plausible. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time blurred with the rain. A man appeared behind me at a rest stop I didn't remember taking. Dark coat, soft voice, eyes that seemed to know me. You're driving far tonight, he said. Trying to outrun it? My voice cracked. I just wanted to get away. He smiled faintly, like someone offering a comfort I wasn't sure I deserved. We all do. Sometimes the road looks empty until it's too late to turn back. He knew my routines. The coffee I bought every morning, the playlist I looped for long drives, the streets I avoided. My old nickname, the one my ex used when he wanted to hurt me gently. I told myself I was overthinking. I wanted to believe him. The highway began to twist. Streetlights elongated, fog rolled in thicker, and the red sheen thickened. Reflections of neon in the puddles swirled like blood in water. Signs appeared, detour ahead, arrows pointing right. I swerved, obeyed, and the vision hit. A crash. My car upside down. Rain hissing over broken glass. Screaming. The smell of burning rubber and gasoline. My hands crushed. My face bleeding. I woke on the shoulder, car intact, seat wet with condensation. Heart pounding, hands trembling. The nights became worse. Every turn suggested by the reflection, every shimmer in the rearview mirror, produced visions of accidents I had survived or narrowly avoided. Car wrecks, falls, fires, arguments I had repressed. I began documenting. Phone, camera, GPS. Every strange patch of asphalt. Every vanishing car. The man at the rest stop, Jonah, he called himself, watched my reactions. Every heartbeat, every hesitation. Calm, observant. invasive. "You hesitate here," he said one night. "I can see the fear. It's honest. It makes sense." I told myself I was overthinking. Maybe he was only perceptive. Maybe he was kind. Then the highway became impossible. Fog thickened to a solid wall. Red patches glistened, pulsing like veins. Every car that passed disappeared. Every exit led back to the same road. GPS looped endlessly, and the voice, soft now, coaxing, intimate. "You can't escape until you face it." I realized the truth. The road was alive, and it consumed anyone carrying unresolved trauma. My fear, my grief, my loneliness, they fed it. The road remembered. It digested. It erased. I tried reversing, tried stopping, tried leaving. Each time, the red sheen thickened. The road pulsed beneath me like a heartbeat. I understood then. It did not want to kill me. Not exactly. It wanted to replace me, absorb me, consume the person I had been. Jonah appeared closer now. Not just at rest stops, in reflections in shop windows, standing under bridges, smiling in rearview mirrors while I drove. He knew where I had hidden my phone the night I cried. He knew the playlist I made for long drives. He knew the smell of my coffee. "You can't outrun yourself," he said once. Calm, knowing, almost tender. I wanted to believe it. I told myself it made sense. Maybe he was helping. Maybe he was only observing. But I stopped trusting my own eyes. The mirrors moved independently. Headlights that were behind me one moment vanished the next. Shadows stretched along the lanes that shouldn't exist. The climax came on a curve in the mountains. I obeyed the reflection's suggestion, a turn that seemed wrong, and the hallucination erupted. My car rolled into the ravine. Screams, metal crunching, neon lights in the fog, rain in my eyes, heart shattered. Then Jonah's voice in the passenger seat. Calm, measured. "Now you know." I woke in a hospital. The police had found me at the side of the highway, car intact, the red sheen gone. My phone was filled with burner emails tracing Jonah's presence. AI-generated messages, metadata, cameras along the highway that had recorded nothing yet stored everything. My routes, my stops, my fears. Jonah, or the persona controlling the system, had been observing me for weeks. Constructed accounts, voice-cloned calls, fake profiles. Every hallucination a psychological test. Every turn a reflection of trauma to weaken me. I survived, but the road follows me still. Neon reflections in puddles look like arteries. Rain on the windshield whispers warnings. Mirrors twitch in the corner of my vision. Every GPS reroute feels like a trap. I live with the knowledge that trauma can be harvested. That obsession can be gentle, subtle, patient. That someone or something can watch, learn, and manipulate without ever touching you. Trust is fragile. Privacy is an illusion. Identity can be mapped, predicted, consumed. And sometimes the road does not end. It waits, red, pulsing, patient, for the next driver. Story 9. I'm telling this because I don't think I have another way to make sense of what happened that night. Every rational explanation I try collapses the moment I remember the headlights. If you ever drive on long, empty highways at night, you might want to stop reading now. I was driving back from a weekend visit to my cousin's place in another city. Nothing unusual, just a long stretch of highway cutting through flat land, occasional road signs, and a sky so dark it felt like it had no end. It was around 2:13 a.m. when I noticed the first strange thing. My GPS flickered. Not a full shutdown, just a glitch. The map froze, then reloaded, and suddenly the route shifted slightly. A detour appeared, recalculating route due to road closure ahead. I frowned. No news, no warnings. But I wasn't in the mood to argue with a machine at that hour, so I followed it. That was mistake number 1. The detour took me off the main highway into a narrower road. Still paved, but older. No streetlights now, just my headlights slicing through darkness and occasional trees lining both sides like silent watchers. I checked my phone. No signal. That's when I first felt it. The silence wasn't normal. Even remote highways have something. Wind noise, insects, distant engine sounds. Here, nothing. just my tires on asphalt, and the faint hum of my car. After about 20 minutes, I saw a sign. It was half-bent, rusted. Next service area, 3 km. Relief hit me. I figured I'd stop, get coffee, reset the GPS. But then something odd happened. The road ahead looked familiar. Not, I've been here before familiar. More like, I had just passed it. Same cracked tree on the left. Same broken reflector post. Same weird white marking on the road that looked like someone had scratched it instead of painted it. I slowed down. Then I saw it again. The same sign. Next service area, 3 km. My stomach tightened. I checked my rearview mirror. Empty road behind me. No cars. No lights. Just darkness stretching infinitely. I kept driving. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. No service area. No change. And then I saw it again. The same rusted sign. The same tree. The same broken post. I wasn't just looping. I was circling something that didn't want me to leave. I stopped the car. Turned off the engine. Silence hit harder than before. Without the engine, it felt like the world itself had paused. Then, a sound. A knock. On my driver's window. I froze. Slowly turned my head. Nothing. Just darkness. Then another knock. This time on the passenger side. I looked. Still nothing. But my breathing was loud now. Too loud. And then my headlights flickered on by themselves. Even though the engine was off. In front of me, about 30 meters ahead, was something that shouldn't have been there. A car. Parked diagonally across the road. Hazard lights blinking. Slow. Mechanical. Like it was struggling to exist. I didn't see it arrive. I didn't hear it. It was just there. Then the driver's door opened. A man stepped out. He didn't walk normally. He dragged his feet slightly, like the ground was heavier than him. And even from this distance, I could see something wrong. He wasn't looking at my car. He was looking slightly above it, like he couldn't focus properly. Then he raised his hand and waved, slowly, once, twice. I should have reversed. I should have turned around. But when I checked the rearview mirror again, there was another car behind me, closer than before. Too close. I hadn't heard it arrive. No engine sound. No gravel crunch. Just presence. Its headlights were OFF. But I could still see its shape. And I realized something that made my skin go cold. It wasn't parked behind me. It was aligned perfectly with my car. Like it had been waiting there the entire time. My radio turned on. I didn't touch it. Static filled the car. Then a voice came through. Calm. Male. Almost tired. You're not supposed to stop here. I looked around the car. My hands were shaking. The voice continued. If you see the man, don't respond. I looked forward again. The man was closer now. Much closer. But something was wrong. His face. It wasn't stable. Like my eyes couldn't lock onto it properly. It kept shifting, blurring, rebuilding. And then I realized he wasn't walking closer. The road was shortening. The distance between us was shrinking without him moving. I slammed the ignition. The engine started instantly. I reversed hard. The tires screeched. And that's when everything broke. The car behind me didn't move. It didn't need to, because the road itself bent. My car turned, but somehow stayed facing forward, like the world refused to let me change direction. Panic set in fully now. I pressed forward instead. The car surged. I aimed straight toward the man. He didn't move. He just stood there, waiting. And just before impact, he smiled. The moment I hit him, nothing happened. No collision, no sound, no body, just passing through empty space, like he was never there. My car shot forward, and suddenly, the highway was back. Real highway. Streetlights, signs, other cars. My GPS reconnected instantly, like nothing had happened. I pulled over at the first gas station I saw, sat in the car for almost 10 minutes before I could move again. When I finally stepped out, I noticed something on my windshield. A thin layer of dust. except there were fingerprints in it. From the inside, not outside. I didn't tell anyone for a long time. Until a few weeks later, I saw a news report. A highway segment had been closed for years due to structural instability and repeated navigation system failures. Multiple drivers had reported the same thing. Detours that didn't exist. Service areas that never appeared. Cars that followed without sound. And a man standing in the road. Always the same description. Always the same gesture. Waving. But the most disturbing part? Every single report ended the same way. The driver eventually returned to the main highway. Safe. Unharmed. Except for one detail. Their dashcam footage always had exactly 3 minutes missing. Right when they entered the detour. I checked mine. Mine had 7 minutes missing. I still drive, but I don't trust detours anymore. And if my GPS ever says, recalculating route due to road closure ahead, I turn it off, immediately, because I already know what's waiting on those roads. And I don't think it lets people leave on the first try.